with, Waldstein Sonata has yet a second name that was not given to it by Beethoven. And this second name is more known and used maybe in Russia and in Europe. It's Aurora. And Aurora, as a goddess of the rising sun, it makes such a perfect sense because, and it also gives me some memories from what my mom was telling me when I was like 3. That moment is that very moment of quietness and darkness in the night before the horizon starts lighting up and the sun comes out. And you can fantasize all you want about what it actually means. But this definitely can be very poetic rendition of it. And one can think about what that quiet night may mean and what could one see there or experience there, and that sense of almost being lost somewhere and finally arriving to the point where the first note of the final movement appears and brings this sense of glowing and quiet yet glowing, but absolutely phenomenal.
Now, one of our focuses at Muzewest Concerts is music education, and we have heard in so many master classes the Waldstein Sonata. If you, let's say a student pretty advanced, they're 13, they're 14, this is their first major Beethoven sonata, what would be your first tip to them on their first lesson of Waldstein with you? They've started to learn
my
the notes.
very first tip
What would you tell them?
that Waldstein should not be your first major sonata.
That's a good tip.
That's the very, well, trust me, I've seen people giving master classes myself when traveling in different places, and I would give a master class and a student comes and they play this sonata or Appassionata, or they're playing Opus 111, and they play and there are good things in there and there are things obviously that can be improved, and I ask them, what other sonatas of Beethoven have you played before? And they're like, this is my first one. And I'm like, oh my god. Yes, there is love of music that we really want to play a piece, and I would never discourage anybody to actually play the piece as their first major sonata or whatever. But it has to come with an experience of at least being very, very familiar with others and understanding how to work with it. And Waldstein, same as Appassionata and same as some of other Beethoven sonatas, has a few traps, I would call them, that are basically cliches that formed throughout many decades of people playing after a famous recording or something, and a lot of people start repeating same things that are not written in the text. And so it becomes almost like a part of the piece where you do this particular ritardando here, or you're doing this particular accent here, or you're doing this rubato in a very, very recognizable way. And then when you're reading the text, you discover, oh, actually, that's not there. There's no accent, or there's no ritardando, or there's no, any other things that are recognizable to us, but they're recognizable because the generations of pianists played it the same way, while Beethoven didn't write it out. So when you're dealing with a piece that this famous, you inevitably go into the circuit of having an audio memory of others playing that, and that means that you will probably start even not thinking about it necessarily, repeating what others did already, not understanding why you're doing, just doing because other people doing. So one of the best things is to be very, very honest with yourself and with the text. Just try to play it a few times just as written, imagining that you have never heard that before, and appreciating how the piece was actually written, whether there are like long periods of pianissimos or these long pedals that are actually very, very incredible in some of Beethoven's works, or there are other things that one needs to appreciate more just because at certain point, if you're playing things just as they're written, and there still will be infinite amount of like possibilities to interpret that, but you're playing the things as they're written and you actually sound fresh. You know?
And that's what I think that's what a lot of people are missing, especially with classical era repertoire, is they've listened to recordings, they've seen things on YouTube, and have they looked at the page?
But
And
also, there is like, you can look at the page, but you also can look at the
like
page.
if our listeners aren't familiar with this piece, what should they go listen to before they listen to you tomorrow or after? They should listen to you tomorrow. But do you have any classic recordings you love of that?
Well, there are many things that can be appreciated in this particular one. Like first two names that come to my mind is Gilels and Horowitz. They're different, but they provide incredible insights in this text. But one can listen to as much as they want. But what I love about an ability to work with the text solely, it's really hard to familiarize ourselves with something without recording, we think these days, because I don't know this piece, let me go listen to something. But mere 100 years ago there was no such opportunity for people, and people whom we admire now, people, I don't know, who were in the very, very beginning of their recording history and before, all the new music that they would get familiar with, they would get familiar just with the text, and they will have to build from scratch their understanding of how it goes, how it's supposed to be. So it was completely different type of work where there were no tips and no like shortcuts. This is just the notes, and now make out something out of it. So it is fun to listen to recordings when you go to a concert, listening to something that you have never heard before, because from the very, very first listening to a musical piece, it is sometimes hard to like get a complete grasp of what it is. But when it comes to Wallenstein Sonata, I mean, there are few things that are more famous than this one.
Now, you mentioned that you had heard these pieces growing up very, very young, and these still are your earliest musical memories. Again, from an educational perspective, how important is it for children to hear music from a very young age in the
Very,
home?
very. Capital V, capital E, capital R, capital Y.
Yay!
Extremely important.
What effect did that have on you? Because you grew up in a musical household, and I know that you write poetry, and I believe you paint as well. Do you paint?
I draw.
So tell me how your childhood and like your musical education helped you to develop into the international artist that you are today. Because I think we see a lot of students coming to our master classes. They've worked really hard on their pieces. They're trying, but we're not sure like the foundations for a liberal arts education are there at home, because there's still they need fingerings and dynamics and ideas spoon fed to them. So how does that musical education help them from a very young age?
I would say that music, as some of people agree with and some do not, is its own language. And you would naturally understand Chinese or Arabian or some other difficult language if you were exposed to it from the very, very first days of your life. Comparing to, you decide to learn it when you're older. Certain things stick to us naturally and become part of ourselves if we're exposed to them young. I disagree with the notion of some people who say, oh, if you didn't start piano or violin or whatever at 5, 6, you will never become a professional musician. That's not true. There are many examples of people who started after they were 10. There were people who were somewhat musical and did a lot of kind of amateur playing, but did not really pursue professional studies, such as Richter, for example, who started like really professionally study piano really late. And there are many other examples. But when this musical language, which is classical music, becomes a natural part of your life because you hear it all the time, what happens is then natural things in music, such as phrasing, such as the feelings that emerge in music, because young children are very susceptible to really experiencing things deeply. All these things, they become like an evident thing. So that's why growing up and hearing music all the time and then starting playing instrument is in a sense easier, because you're not questioning, oh, how am I phrasing this? Or what this musical process goes, because you've heard so many other examples, not necessarily on the piano. It could be string quartets, could be orchestral music, could be concerti, could be choral music, could be oratorios, anything. But the moment you, if you're starting completely from scratch, having no previous ideas of what this world is, it's like going, blindfolded and trying to understand how this whole universe works without having ever seen it, and you only able to see it when you discover it, and to discover it you need experience in hearing different things. That's why also curiosity is a very important thing. Curiosity.
This is important.
The element of curiosity is something that we find is missing in so many of the young people who come to our classes. Some of them, they all come well prepared, they're respectful, they're kind, they're well trained, but I often wonder, is there a spark of curiosity in them that's going to push them forward? And that's what I've always loved about your playing and the projects that you do, Asiya. You did your midnight pieces. How many weeks did that run for?
It did, well, originally I wanted to run it for 52 weeks. I did 30, and I had to stop, make a pause in it, because I was moving states and I was moving places and then moving from one place to another. And it was like this year that made continuous recording difficult. But recently, actually in the very beginning of the pandemic, I continued, and so I'm now on my episode 37, and there are 14 more coming.
And I think that's what's
I think that's what's really important, is that this curiosity is something that fuels our artistic journey, and it fuels our learning. I know that I'm more curious now after my Kodai course about the music of Bartok, to join, like, and to learn more about the music from my country of heritage. And what you said about being introduced to the language early is so important, and that's why we'll be having a live call with two of my Kodai professors from Hungary in 2 weeks, and I'm so excited because the audience is going to get to hear these two amazing teachers just put it out there that, like, children should be singing from a young age, and that when we hear that language from a young age, it's not foreign to us, and we get better at it the more we hear the sounds. And I clearly recall going to China in 2018, and I had 4 months of Mandarin class twice
a week for 2 hours.
It's not much.
It's not much. Enough to get you started to get your food. And I remember coming back, and my friends were like, "Oh,
you're doing
You're doing
well.
well.
And
And
your
your
tones
tones
and
and
your
your
sounds
sounds
are
are
so
so
improved. And I
improved. And
think
I think that
it's that
it's that
exposure,
exposure.
and trusting that children have it in them. So you've chosen to pair the Waldstein with the Chopin Fantasy. And are there any other projects, as we wrap up our call, any other projects that our audience can look forward to seeing from you in the future?
Well, I'm about to send my score of Rachmaninoff cello transcription to the print. It's been such a long journey. It's been insane. It's been much longer than it should be, but I'm very happy that this first stone of my transcription output is going to be available hopefully very soon, along with a few of other smaller transcriptions of mine. While the next year plan is to make the transcription of Strauss's Ein Heldenleben available as well. And yeah, it's very exciting, and I'm very happy. And it's been a long process, but it was very, very rewarding indeed. And I actually wanted to add one thing, echoing what you said about your trip, and echoing about exposure. When I was in my teens, I didn't have a computer, I didn't have a cell phone. If I wanted to listen to anything that I didn't know before, I had to go with my legs to the library, check things out, bring them home, investigate, bring them back, make notes because I couldn't like really copy anything. And so when people now come for a lesson or just ask questions that are very simple, that you ask a person, I don't know, simple questions about, let's say, output of Beethoven in different genres, and they don't know it, and or anything else from like things from the standard repertoire, and not like it depends on your own likings. There are some people who don't really care about the repertoire outside of the standard repertoire, but when you see that anything, if we're not talking like a completely new music or like late 20th century music, anything before like 1940s takes seconds to look up on IMSLP, takes seconds to look up on YouTube. If you don't know something, you can go to Google and ask, what is that? What is that? I recently had a conversation with a person who was playing sonata by Schubert, and didn't know what sonata form was. And
oops.
And I'm like, well, I understand, because maybe the way you were taught did not include conversation about the theory of it, but it's your responsibility of a musician to understand what sonata is, or maybe understand what other sonatas Schubert wrote, or maybe how sonata form was formed throughout the history and what it means. And again, in my childhood, it will take me a few hours to go to the library and check out a book or two or three, read and check out recordings. And these days you can do these things in seconds. So no excuses.
Yeah, the consuming of information that's available to us. Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with
I agree
you.
with you.
There's
There's
really no
really no
reason
reason
to not know some of these pieces and to understand their form. It has been so great to have on our podcast. We've had Asiya Korepanova from
Thank you so much for
Boston.
having me.
And tomorrow, Saturday, August 15th, she will have a live concert for us virtually, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, which would make it 4 in the morning in Russia, in certain parts of Russia.
My mom would be up.
4 in the morning for your mom? Okay.
Yeah, my mom would be up. She's a she's a diehard.
Hey. I know that maybe in Vladivostok it's a nice morning to start that, but in some parts of Russia
It's still 3 or 4 in the morning.
So we welcome all of our guests. Tickets are available on our website, and you can search it on Eventbrite. So thank you so much, Asiya. It's been good to hear
Sort of
how these young
these young
artists
artists can develop.
and look forward to your performance tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to it. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Asiya.